Hello, welcome to the July 21st, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, realize that as the live stream goes on, I will probably not be able to answer questions in kind of a real-time manner. So if you don't get an immediate response to your question after typing it in, realize that we'll go through chronologically and try to get all the questions, and we'll try to catch up, and we'll go for up to about 4 hours today, and we'll try to get through all the questions. We have people that had mailed questions in, and if you need to mail a question in, you could send a question to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and when asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, so if it's 11 or 12, and the operating system that you're currently operating, that information is always helpful. If you don't see, again, immediate response, if we could try to refrain from asking the same questions repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the whole process and doesn't allow us to get through as many questions. That would be appreciated. We should have an index of all of the topics discussed today at the top of the comments field, pinned with timestamps, so you could quickly navigate to particular topics when asked. And if you wanted to search topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating that website. So there's over 27,000 different topics that have been created there that you could access and search through. We also want to give special thanks to Jazz Dude and to Agent K, who serve as moderators. So they're not Steinberg employees, they just do it to make it a better community. And we will give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a wonderful resource of information that is available for the Steinberg community that's really beneficial, different tutorials, and kind of all compiled into one handy area. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the United States distributor of Steinberg products. And I'm based in Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C. So if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. It's always fascinating to see people from all over the world joining in on the live streams. So with that, we will go ahead and begin. So I saw a couple questions I got that were entered in earlier, got chopped off, but I think I copied those. So let's go through some. So the first question is, what is the best way to learn all of the functionality of the Project Logical Editor? There is, if you go into the documentation, we can go into the Project Logical Editor, and then we'll kind of go through the different, particular functions of the Project Logical Editor. So you could know exactly what each of these particular functions and these conditions can do. But I think, kind of knowing what's available is handy, but I think the best way to learn it is, just to use it and experiment. And always, there's a number of different presets that are available. So if you go to factory presets, if you say, okay, I wanted to maybe experiment with naming, I would come over here and open up a factory preset and just kind of take a look and try to figure out what is going on with a particular preset. So let's say if I want to go to a user preset, just come over and we see that there's a pre-section. We could define, whether we want to deselect, select, transform, or delete, and we could set criteria here. If this is set to transform, we could say we want to take different scenarios that meet this criteria and change it this way. So we could have commands that happen before and after. So, I think if you studied each of the different, target filters and, transformation actions that, you may not get a good practical use of it. So I would play around with some of the presets and try to backward engineer that. There is a particular logic to it. Excuse me, hence the name, the project logical editor. So it may seem difficult at first, but but we have lots of examples that you could search at cubaseindex.com, and if there's any particular function you want to see in the project logical editor, at that point you could always ask for particular functionality, and we could see if we could get a project logical editor preset created for you. Okay, so we see question: is it possible for us to use I guess regex or regex inside a project logical editor's event target filters? So I think that's maybe for a shortened version of like regular expressions. So within, so when we come over here, we could see, we're going to have our typical Boolean conditions, like, this and this or this, but it's going to be set to the particular functions that are available. So there isn't a way to add particular functions to different elements. Like for target filters, it's going to be based on the criteria that's kind of set in the program, because that's how the programming language is designed within the program. All right, so let's jump over to our questions. All right, so we have a question from Ace Amadeus, who asks, hi Greg, I hope you're doing well. If I registered my VSTs with new Steinberg system on laptop, will the licenses still be available to use on my USB e-licenser when I go to work on my old desktop? Thanks. So when it could depend upon the license. So sometimes, like when we went from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12, what would happen is it would take your Cubase 11 license and convert it. Because we couldn't run Cubase 11 Cubase 12 wasn't available to run on the e-licenser, so it made that into a permanent non-upgradable license for your Cubase 12. You were for Cubase 11 on the e-licenser, and then the version 12 was on the Steinberg licensing system. So, and then there's some versions that were kind of at the next version, such as we did with Spectral Layers, we did it with Dorco, and it went Dorco 3 to Dorco 4, Cubase 11 to Cubase 12, as it went up in Halligan 6 to Halligan 7, that as we went up a generation, that we upgraded the particular license to the new Steinberg licensing system. Now there's a number of instruments and sound sets that just migrated over. So if it migrated over and you converted the e-licenser license to a Steinberg licensing, so from the USB stick or a soft e-licenser to the new Steinberg licensing, it's then not available to run under e-licenser anymore. But if you wanted to run it on your old computer, all you would have to do is simply go to the Steinberg Activation Manager, and you could activate the license to use on up to 3 different computers. So they'll still all be available to run on your old computer as well. All right, so we see Uno Memento checking in from Finland. Thanks for joining us today. Always great to see Jazz Dude on. So we see Alexander Plasko asks, hello Greg, have you played around with the DM7 mixer yet? I seem to remember you mixing live events. I haven't done like live sound in a long time, and usually if I'm doing live events, I'm kind of just showing up as the dumb bass player. But I kind of played around with it a little bit. We had kind of a corporate kickoff in April, and I got to kind of play around with the prototype, so I haven't had much experience with it. And in the United States, we had a big trade show, Infocom, and it wasn't really in my area of the company, so I haven't and they had more mixers to kind of play around with there. And I wasn't at that particular show, so I haven't had a lot of hands-on experience. I have played around with the DM3 a bit though, so, but nothing more than kind of watching a presentation and going up and going through some different windows on the DM7. But it looks like a wonderful mixer. So it seems like the response has been incredibly positive from the market, with all sorts of great orders from dealers and customers. Okay, so we see Jason Chinian says there was a time production. So hi folks, he wishes everyone as well. He's from York in the UK. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue. Every time I open an old project from Cubase 11 and try to have it open as Cubase 12, it automatically opens in Cubase 10. I've checked all my preferences, so it's not a preference that does that, it's actually just part of the operating system. So if you have a particular project file, so let me just come over. Okay, so let's say if we're here, if you just right click, and this is kind of not in Cubase itself, but within the operating system. So here you say open with, and then you could just choose Cubase 12, and you could set this. So, and it's kind of the same thing in Mac or PC. So just kind of right click on the project file, and then you could choose which program opens it and which is the default application. So a .cpr file can be loaded in, from Cubase SX1 all the way to Cubase 12, or any version in between. So you have to just right click and tell your operating system that when you double click on the .cpr file to open in this particular version of Cubase. All right, wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. And we have Arif B just saying hello to me and to everyone. All right, so we see Mike Braley asks his question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to click on the open space and have the playhead move there instead of going to the top bar, Cubase Pro 12? Yeah, so all you have to do is realize that when we click, there's a preference if you're clicking on an empty space. So I think it's maybe under transport. So you see locate when clicked in empty space. So if there's an empty space, it'll immediately go there. If you want to click on top of an event, I think it's if you hold Alt or Option plus Shift. And let's just, so Alt or Option plus, so Alt or Option plus Shift, and then you can just put it directly on top of an event without selecting the particular event. So if you go to Preferences, we can say locate when clicked in empty space, and then if you're not clicking on top of an event, it will go, but let's say as you're playing, if I just want to click here, just say, okay, now I want to start playing right from there. Just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift and click, and then that way it's not selecting the event, but it's just moving the playhead position. So you don't have to go up top to do that. So Alt or Option plus Shift. All right, wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Glad he can make it today. All right, we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Always wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta. Okay, so we see from We Do Love You, hi Greg. So thanks for being on the live stream. All right, so we have Diamond District Studios joining us from Cape Town, South Africa. Thanks for being on. Okay, so Patrick Emmanuel A asks, hi Greg, is there a way to create a macro or shortcut like selected tracks all grouped together and bus is created in a single key command? Is it possible? So let's say if I want to take like these tracks, and if I want to take all these tracks here and send it to a bus, let me just... All right, so if you wanted to do this with a key command, if you go to, I think it's, let's go to our key commands, and we could choose, I think it's under Mix Console, or under Mixer. You'll see like add group track to selected, or add selected to group track. So you could just have a key command for that, or trigger it from like a directly from a MIDI remote. Or you could just, without having to do that, we could just say, okay, I want to add a group channel to those selected channels. So we'll say, okay, this could be drums, and now all those particular tracks are routed to the drum group as we do that. And if you wanted to do this with folder tracks as well, so I want to take these tracks, add it to a group and to a folder, what we could do, there is a macro that already comes with Cubase for this, where you say, and excuse my excessively large macro list, we'll say selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. And then I could say drums, and it's going to create a folder, and then it'll create the particular, and then it'll create the group channel all in one motion. So you don't need to have a macro to do it. One comes with it if you want to do folders and setting it to a group, or you could set it to a group with a single key command as well. All right, so we see Patrick Emmanuel A asks, Greg, we need to transfer MIDI notes inside key editor itself. Like I select 3 MIDI tracks, piano, bass, strings inside key editor. If I move bass part to the piano, just select transfer. If not, will Cubase 13 have it? All right, so let's go ahead and... All right, so let's take a look, show you how to do this. All right, so let's say we have like a Rhodes patch, and we have a synth bass, maybe not a synth bass, synth lead, and let's see, like a pad shop. So I want to, we'll just create some events here. Okay, so I'm going to select all 3 events and go into my key editor, and I'll just... All right, and I'll just go ahead and I'll just draw some notes in. So let's say, all right, so let's say I have these notes. So currently I'm in the Rhodes part. So if I wanted to copy these notes, so I'm going to come over and I'll just select all the notes and copy, and then I could just go to my synth bass part, and here we could just kind of choose to edit the active part. So if we want to go to synth bass, I think we could just paste, and let's go to this particular part, paste, And I will go back up to my synth bass part, and let's move this down an octave. So you can see that now as we play, we'll have 3 different parts. So we'll say we'll go to our pad shop and select all, and we'll go up. So now as we play, and we're just, so once you have, like, once you select your multiple events here, at that point you go into the editor, and you could choose exactly kind of, I'll just go to my full screen editor, but you could just switch between the different active parts, and you could cut, copy, paste directly from there. So let me know if that makes sense, but you could have multiple parts and simply cut, copy, paste between them. Okay, so we see a question from Patrick. What does the bracket and do in the project logical editor? So we could consider this kind of like a Boolean condition. Okay, so let's say I want to select tracks named Forget the Past and Urban Ballads. Okay, so I wanted to select tracks with these particular names. Okay, so I'm going to go to my project logical editor, and we'll go to setup, and I'll just kind of clear my different fields. Okay, so right now, let's say we have Forget the Past and Urban Ballads are 2 tracks. So I want to select, and we're going to say media type. We'll say our container type is going to be equal to a track. So we want to select tracks that are the name, and we'll say contains forget. So when we do this, we can say, okay, now if we, all right, so now I have this track selected, I do this, it selects that. So, and we see the Boolean condition here of and. All right, so I'm going to add a second condition. All right, and we'll give this a name of, and we'll do kind of the same thing. So we'll say, we're going to say name contains urban. Okay, so right now it's going to look to select a track that contains the name forget and urban. So if I do this and we have this track selected, nothing is going to be selected because it's looking for a track. And let's say if I add a track here, we'll just add an audio track, and we'll call this Forget Urban. All right. So now, because this condition is saying we want to select tracks that contain the name Forget and Urban. So it's not going to select Forget the Past or Urban Ballads. It's going to probably select this one if I did it correctly. Now, if I switch this Boolean condition from and to or, so it doesn't have to contain both of these. It has to contain, now I wanted to select the tracks that have forget or urban in the track name. So now when I hit apply, it'll select Forget the Past, Urban Ballads, and Forget Urban, because we are looking to select tracks that have the name Forget Urban, Forget or Urban, as opposed to Forget and Urban together. So that's what this Boolean condition allows you to do. So let me know if that's helpful for you. It's great to see you on, Patrick. Glad you could join us. Okay, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A. I know we can measure tempo and tempo track, but can we measure timing of the song, like whether it's in 3/4 or 6/8, or is that available in Cubase? So, we could, it's really, that's kind of could be more of a user defined thing because, every 3/4 measure, could be a 1/4 measure. Every 4/4 measure could be a 2/4 measure or a 1/4 measure. You could have 3/4 or 6/8 or 6/4. So there isn't kind of an automatic tempo like time signature because it's really could depend on, you could have the same time represented different ways. So if you have a 5/4 bar, you could have it as 5/4, or you could alternate 2/4 and 3/4, 2/4, 3/4. So you could have kind of very similar things, and we don't want to assume the particular time signature for you. So I think it's easy enough for most people to kind of figure out, just by counting if their song's in 3/4 or 6/8 or 5/4 or 4/4. So, but realize that a song could all be in 1/4. It could all be in 2/4 and a couple measures of 1/4. And you can say there's a couple measures of 1/4 could make the 2/4 measure a 3/4. It's the same thing. It really depends upon the actual music that's entailed within the particular events. All right, wonderful to see Anteas saying bonsoir. I probably said that wrong. All right, always great to see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. My chat field. Okay, so we see question. I have a question for live StreamYard. I have trouble to get Cubase 10.5 to be heard on YouTube live StreamYard. I have a 2014 Pro 15 with a Babyface Pro. Do you think Google Meet is better? So I think that you'll probably have the same issues. So depending upon, and probably within your Babyface Pro, you may have like a loopback function within the audio interface. So you can make sure that you have the loopback enabled. If not, you could probably do a very convoluted routing, which will seem very obtuse at first, but after a while may become second nature using the like the RME Total Mix software. So when I go to like my particular audio interface, I could enable loopback. So that would take my microphone that's connected into it and then take the output of the audio and loop it back so that I could take that output into something like, YouTube Live through OBS or from Google Meet. So it's kind of the same problem, I think, with either of the programs. So you could do it through your audio interface. What I choose to do for simplicity's sake and just how I've had it set up for a long time, and I kind of like the mechanics of it, is I have one audio interface that Cubase sees, and I'm currently going into a Yamaha AG08 mixer. And the AG08 mixer, that is what is used for the stream. So if I was doing Google Meet, or I run it through OBS for the YouTube, there's also other utilities. I think there's Voice Meter from that is a Windows utility, but I know you're on Mac. But you should be able to do it with probably your Babyface Pro and do the routing and enable loopback. So check that out if you have those settings, or consider just getting another audio interface. It's really easy to do it that way, and you don't have to worry about changing sample rates and depending on your needs. All right, wonderful to see Daniela Tokan from Bochum, Germany. I'm sure I said that wrong. All right. Always great to see Razel from Denmark. All right, and we have Volker checking in from Germany. Maybe Hanover Munden. So we see RLG question. Hi, there's a video of new update 0.7. So there's no significant new features that were introduced. It's more primarily more of a maintenance release and some further optimizations. So nothing really worth kind of specifically to do a video on that was in 7, like 12.07, that wasn't in 12.06. All right, and we have Troy, who's also watching all the way from South Africa. Thanks for being on. Okay, and we see Jovanovic 3D from Slovenia, I believe. Always wonderful to see Peter on from Montreal. We have Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. All right, so we see from Mike Reinhardt, greetings, Greg. Is there a way to export multiple audio events with unique description names without the file name being appended in parentheses? So when you go to like the export, and let me just come over here and I'll just... All right, so if I want it to come over, we could say I want to, let's say I select the particular events here, and we'll go to File, to Export. And then we'll choose Selected Events. So here we could use Custom Name. All right, so let's just call this all right, so let's just call this Mike. And then we could have a particular naming scheme. So we'll just say, okay, I don't want to include the track name, and I'll hit OK. So we'll have Mike. So we'll come over here and let's export these to, we'll go to our project audio folder. All right, so now we'll choose to export these. We'll create unique names. And now when we go to our pool window, I didn't put them into, all right, and let's come over, I didn't put them specifically into the project, we just exported them out. Okay, so we'll come here. And here's the files that we just created directly there without the description. So so make sure that you could go into the particular naming scheme. So we'll come over, and again, if we do, like I just had those events selected, so we'll go to, and I'll select them now, but go to Export Selected Events, and then you could just simply go directly here to the naming scheme. So here you could include the name, you could include, you know, the track name, what, you know, you could have different elements that you include directly right there. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Mike. Mike says he's the king of odd questions. So there's no odd questions. That's what we try to do, 4 hours of helping odd questions. All right, always wonderful to see Mark Rabin from Montana on. Glad you can make it today. Larry B is watching from his deck, where it's sunny with some clouds here in Brampton. Sounds like a nice place to be. Wish I could do live streams on the deck. It'll probably start to rain. All right. So we see Nick saying hello to everyone. Glad you can make it today from, I believe he's in Essex in the UK. So we have a comment from Volker saying Cubase controls everything. I like it. All right, so we see just a question or comment. Hi, I'd like to see auto accompaniment in Cubase. Is it possible? So it's not kind of like like an arranger workstation, kind of like a Yamaha Tyros. We used to have elements of that. It was introduced probably 1994, 1995 in Music Station, which was kind of like an entry-level program, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of particular interest in it at the time from the software realm. But, I'll pass this along as a comment when I submit my report and all the different aspects that people have requested. But there isn't kind of like an audio accompaniment features. But there used to be in Music Station. It's kind of an older program. And then it was a module for a while called Studio Tracks. But it wasn't utilized much, and it's like when the feature went away, I'd never heard a complaint about it. I think it was pretty underutilized. All right, so we have Juha from Finland. Thanks for joining us today. You see Uno Memento as a fellow attendee from Finland. That's great. All right, so we see Michael Pierce just wishing everyone a good evening, and he says the school summer holidays have started in England, so it's total chaos outside. All right. All right. My chat field just jumped. All right, so we see from Michael Pierce, just as a quick question, is there any way to detect and strip silence from multiple audio files without having to click through OK multiple times? Just stripped out about 80 tracks. So let's take a look and see if I could kind of create a scenario here. So let's say I want to take these files, and we'll go to audio to bounce selection. I'll replace that. All right, so I'll just make these into separate audio files. Okay, so now we have 3 separate distinct audio files, and let's see if we have these all selected. If we go to advanced, and we'll do detect silence. Yeah, so it looks like it's going to do each file independently. But I'll mention that as maybe, I can see where it's kind of a nice fail-safe to make sure before you get rid of stuff to where each file you might want to automatically review it quickly. but I'll mention to see if they could just do a apply to all selected function. So thanks for bringing that up, Michael. At least you get paid by the hour while you do it as an audio engineer generally. All right, so we see David M. from Liverpool on, I believe. Let me just clear my throat. All right. All right, so we see question. What are the benefits of upgrading to Nuendo? Do you think Nuendo is Cubase on steroids, or all Cubase functions are inside Nuendo? So I believe that basically all the Cubase features are inside of Nuendo, and Nuendo is going to offer some additional specialized tools, and these could include, like if you're working with game audio production, there's some additional sound design plugins like a randomizer. There's also like a Doppler effect, so often used in post-production. You're going to have a lot of ADR functionality. There's some extended surround sound support. So if you wanted to have like a multi-bed Atmos mix, we could do that. There's some additional plugins that will be in, some additional kind of renaming capabilities if you need to do kind of batch renaming of files. So there's a lot of there's a lot of kind of very specialized tools. I would say that, I'm sure that we at Steinberg would love to, if you wanted to upgrade, you could, but I would say if you're doing music production, that it's probably not so necessary to go beyond Cubase. But if you're doing a lot of specialized functions, for like game audio or audio post-production, there's some significant features in there that often you would have to spend more than Nuendo just to have that particular feature set, like reconforming audio, stuff like that. So. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A. Says, Greg, I saw Oppenheimer scoring video. Ludwig Göransson was working on Cubase on the video. Have you met him? And what's your thoughts on his works? I think he does incredibly interesting works. I've been to his studio like 3 or 4 times. I've met him. He's like very, very down to earth, just a really very creative and talented guy. He's, has a really interesting studio where it's like, and I think his studio design, there's you go into like his main tracking room is almost like a sound design, perfect little spot for sound design with all sorts of exotic instruments. But yeah, he's very, very creative and like very down to earth and humble. And I've seen a little bit. I haven't watched much of the Oppenheimer previews, but I did see a little bit and hear some of it in the preview. And Christopher Nolan films are always pretty amazing, so I'm looking forward to seeing it. But yeah, Ludwig's a very down to earth, normal guy, and it does great work. So it was a pleasure to meet him and be able to spend a little bit of time with him. All right, wonderful to see Braxel on. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see a question. If I want to use an AU plugin, are they compatible with both Cubase on the Mac and Cubasis on iPad, or do we need to buy it for each platform? So generally, Cubase doesn't run AU plugins on the Mac platform. I think Cubasis does, and there's probably a good chance that if you buy it on And it could really depend upon the plugin manufacturer, but most of the time, something that's for iPad, you would buy it on, through the Apple App Store, and there's no other way to purchase it. And I'm not sure if that would also grant you theoretically, it could grant you a license if you bought the iPad version. But I would say generally it's not the case. Doesn't mean that some companies aren't doing it. So, but Cubase itself just runs VST plugins. So we see, hello, nice to be here. Producer from Uganda. I have Mac High Sierra. Can I get a Cubase version for it? So I think that currently, I want to say, and I sometimes get my Mac OS versions kind of mixed up because they update it every year and give it a different, for the longest time, we give it a different cat name. But I want to say version 10, maybe the latest version that ran or that was actually tested on High Sierra. But you may want to just Google it. But, we're at version 12, so we've had 10, 10.5, 11, and 12. So it could be that 12 may not work on High Sierra. And there may not be a current solution. If you purchased maybe an older license from a dealer, you might be able to get it to work. But I don't think that anything that you would buy from Steinberg or from a dealer as a current version would work. You see David M. just saying, rest in peace to Tony Bennett, forever remembered. So, yeah, I got to work with Tony Bennett once with Phil Ramone at his studio in New Jersey. So it was a fun day. It was one day my grandmother was impressed with my job. So. Okay. All right, we see Michael Pierce also just kind of sharing his insights on differences or what's added with Nuendo over Cubase. See a comment from Mark Rabin, just says yesterday, speaking of time signatures, he was looking at some tab for some Tool songs, and his signature changes like every single measure. There's a track for time signature. I keep signature track on top. That type of music is not my specialty, and saying he's more American folk / blues, but he thought it was super interesting seeing all the different time signatures. Yeah, sometimes when people do transcriptions, they can be a little... at times I find looking at some, it's like, oh, it's just notated like not how a musician often would do it. So sometimes it could be a bit more academic. But all right, so we see just from saying from We Do Love You, just about the Nuendo and Cubase, it says, and this is directed towards Michael Pierce. Well, go ahead and respond to it. So you think Nuendo would be better for YouTube Live? I'm trying to use Cubase. Maybe Nuendo for YouTube Live streaming for teaching students using Piano Tech. Thanks again. So I don't think there's any benefit of Nuendo for that particular workflow or that work case over Cubase. All right, so you see Mark Rabin has Google eating his questions again. So, and happened to Nick as well. Sorry about that. Maybe you see if it's not too long. Yeah, ironically, when you say that Google's eating your questions, that comment always comes through, but not the question that was eaten. All right, we see Mark Rabin also saying it's hot in Montana as well. Always wonderful to see Brian Sawyer Sr. from Crystal Coast, North Carolina. Glad you could make it today. You see Jazz Dude just saying that you can post in Discord and he'll post the questions here. My live stream just kind of, my chat field jumped. All right. All right, so we have Lauren Scott checking in from Riverside, California, not too far from our office in Orange County. All right, Nick heard a rumor that you get 10% chance of your next mix being exponentially better if you hit the like button for the live stream. So that's worth. I think that's worth it. Anyway. Reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. And again, if you learn a new tip or trick, make sure that you actually hit the like button. See, Michael Pierce, just his revelation today, he didn't think about the hourly rate of hitting the enter key multiple times. All right, so we see just a comment from Jazz Dude that, and maybe this is what's causing some questions, not to get added, that about posting links. So if you include links, that could block it if you're not a moderator. All right, so we see from RM has a question. It says, hi Greg, I have a question I was scratching my head on. In MIDI remote, I can't switch focus mode from fixed to track selected because focus mode is grayed out. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at our MIDI remote. Let's close that out. So let me just switch my. Okay, so I'm going to just. It says can't switch focus mode from fixed to track selected. All right, so let's say I want to come over here. Okay. So let's say I have on the selected track. So I'm going to take my selected track and I want to, we'll just mute. Okay, and I want to do it with this particular button, so I'm going to assign that focus mode there. All right, so this should, as soon as I come over here on the selected track, mute the selected track. All right, so and all right, it says I can't switch focus mode from fixed to track selected. So let's say on this, I just want to go to key commands. and we'll just go to edit, and let's say we just want to go to, let me just let's choose select none for this parameter here. So all right, so that's not going to deal with any folks. So let's say I have a number of events here, and then when I hit this button, this is not any focus mode. And if I hit this button on the selected track, so as I go here, we could mute. So make sure it's just not, maybe when you go into the functions browser here, that, we could choose what is for selected tracks if you don't want it to be for the selected track. But if you wanted to go to like the mix console and, or choose key commands for mixer to, to mute or, do kind of different functions here. So maybe it's just where you're choosing like the key commands versus the selected track category. But let me know, if I might be misunderstanding, but let me know if that makes sense, or if you want to clarify so it could be less dense if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we see from Patrick, just says, Greg, why does Cubase look like very old software? I mean, not very colorful like other DAW. Is there a reason behind the feature? I don't know. So a lot of times, it could depend. There's a lot of people don't necessarily utilize a lot of the colors. So let's say if I just open up this particular project, but it's also that, we have people that work on their programs for 16 hours a day. So the color choices are really designed for, for being able to work very long hours without eye strain, so that's really kind of the design intention. So you could have, lots of colors in your particular program. So, you could colorize the events, colorize your mixer. Not everyone actually chooses to go in and colorize different aspects. So if you wanted to come over here, let's make my mix console, and we can make folder tracks colorize. So we can come over here and we could adjust the intensity of the colors if you want, but it's really designed so that you could work for very long hours without significant eye strain. So it's there, all these colors are, very intentionally designed to, so that they complement each other and are easy on the eyes for long periods of work. So you see many other programs, since Steinberg has done this, kind of going to a darker color scheme so that it's easier on the eyes, as opposed to having like all white backgrounds. And after a while, you're just like, turn the lights off, put the dimmer switch on. So, but there's a lot of people that never colorize their tracks, and then it's like, then it doesn't look so colorful. So make sure that you actually are just employing, different track colors to change, and you could add, have up to 128 different colors available for you to use as well. So I don't think it looks I don't think it looks old. I think it's, pretty cutting edge in that regards. So when you have people working for long periods of time, which is what a lot of our users do, that the interface isn't a distraction for them. You see David M. just asking, just was asking Mark Rabin if his question was too long to show. I think there is like a 200 character limit when asking questions. All right, so we see from RM, and this may be kind of just a follow-up question to the control question, and I just see reason for using this. I would like to be able to see the 8 physical knobs of the MIDI controller to control the selected track, the other 7 following tracks. And I'm in track 2. I'll control 2 through 9. Okay, so this could really depend on. Okay, so I think I know what you're going for here. So let's say, and this could depend upon your controller, but I'll just do a new project. All right, so let's say I'll add, so I have my nano control here. So let's say I have 24 tracks. Okay, and I'll show you another trick, and this could go to Patrick's. We'll just add a preference here. So I'm going to just use previous track color +1. So now when I add 24 tracks, it'll just automatically colorize my tracks here. All right, so I'm going to switch my MIDI remote to, so generally most controllers will work in banks. So, but let's say if I come over here to my mixer category, so here we could choose to, do next mixer bank. So we see these 8 colors here, and I'll just make this all smaller. Bear with me just a second. All right, so we see this outline. Now when I hit the bank button, we could just kind of go back and forth between our different banks. So I'll just add another audio track here. All right, so now we're at bank 1 through 8. We go banks, 9 through 16. So when we look at this particular setting, we can say this is going to do our next mixer bank. So generally, most like 8-channel fader units will just kind of go in banks. But let's say if I want to switch this button here, okay, and I'll just switch this from marker, and let's say if we go to key commands, I think if we just go to navigate down, we'll see if this or let me just see what happens. So if, all right, let me see if I do this with just a keyboard shortcut. So we see this white area here, and so we could select the particular track. So, but generally the control surface itself is going to work, again in banks. So it's going to be like, 1 through 8. And as I go to my mixer here, I'm just going to use my faders on the nano control here. And as I go to my mixer, and we'll look at channels 1 through 8. That now we could come over here, and so we'll say, okay, here's channels 1 through 8, bank over, and hit 9 through 16. So at this point, where I have my channel selected, so let's just come. So, and it could also just be, so when you see the banks, and this could be set up when we go into the MIDI remote. And, if you wanted to, so we could select the particular channel, but if we go to like our mix console to mixer bank zone to actions, this is where you could set up the particular, previous and next mixer bank. And that's generally kind of how control surfaces work. The Yamaha Nuage, you could just kind of select different channels and have those all grouped together. But most controllers don't really have that type of capability and will kind of work in banks. So we'll just, if I come over here to track, if I select track 2 is still within that particular bank. So it's just, I could play around with it some more over the weekend and see if I could come up with a way of not using the banks, but generally that's kind of the way that most of the controllers are designed to work. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. Is there a guide or something similar to set up Windows optimally for Cubase? So, there's obviously probably a number of different elements on the Discord server, but, there are some suggestions from the Steinberg website. And realize that's, sometimes when we get into, but we'll just say optimizing Windows for Cubase. There is a little like a knowledge base article, Windows how to set up and optimize for a digital audio workstation. So we can see just a number of different tweaking that you could be utilizing here. So that's a great start. And there's all sorts of different YouTube videos, but this is a great area to kind of check out the Cubase Nation Discord as well. I'm sure there's lots of different options and tools available in there. All right, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, happy Friday. I came across the length editor yesterday. I was wondering how it's used / works. Thank you. All right, so I'm not sure what the length editor is. So if we have events, on that we wanted to, adjust the length. So let's say I wanted to take, this particular event here, and we can see the length of it indicated as soon as I activate the project. It's always helpful. So as soon as an event is selected, we could see the length here. And then, so if I wanted to, make that event shorter or longer, we could just come right there and do it like so. So let me know if that's what you mean by the length editor. But it's the only thing that kind of comes to mind, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so we have a question from RM who asks, hi Greg, is it possible to live quantize the MIDI input to 1 bar and more? Only found the quarter note max in MIDI quantize. Reason for that, I would like to use that as input for Groove Agent 5 SE pattern switch. So I think it should work. Let's come over here. I'll activate this. And let me revert the project. All right, so let's say we have All right, so we come over to Groove Agent here. I'm going to just set my quantized value to whole note. And then we're going to activate auto quantize here. And I will just set all right, I'll switch octaves here. All right, we'll just come over, we'll open up Groove Agent. All right, let's just find my correct octave. Okay, let's open up my MIDI monitor, plug in here, make sure I have. Adjust my octaves here on my controller. All right, so I'm just going to set this up for auto quantize for 1 quarter note. So as we record in, and I'm going to take it off cycle mode. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm going to move earlier in time here. All right, so now when we look at our notes that were recorded in, it's only going to place the patterns directly on the beginning of the measure. So we set the quantized value here to whole note, and that's 1/1. This is half note, quarter note. Now, if you, for some reason, if you don't see whole note listed, if we go to like your quantized setup, at this point there is a reset. So if we come directly here to our quantized values, you can restore the factory presets, and then you should see, if you don't see like a 1/1, which would be a whole note, open up the quantized panel and then select the value here, like the preset, and then you could restore the factory presets. But that looked like it would only allow me to record directly on the particular downbeat of the measure. So, and that's when we have AQ activated here in the transport bar. All right. All right, so we have Quellen who asks, hello, Greg, is it possible to put plugins as insert to let them work in multi-mono? So if you wanted to take a particular insert effect and have it work, different values for left and right, what we could do is, let's say, okay, I want to come over here and I just want to add, let's say, my compressor, and I want to add the compressor here. So we're going to add kind of two of the same dynamics, capabilities. Okay, so when we open up our channel settings, so we'll just come over here, open it up, and on our inserts, we could go to our insert routing, and we could choose for these to be mono. So if I wanted to have like different dynamics processing for my left and right channels, I could just come here and so you could adjust kind of the routing of that. So just make sure this is. And then you could have kind of independent settings for left and right channel. So you got one compressor go for the left channel, the other compressor process the right channel. All right, and we see probably a follow-up question to the quantize, auto quantize, and it just says so I could adjust it to the same length as the MIDI patterns in Groove Agent 5. So it you know, some of the Groove Agent patterns aren't always, they could be like 8 measures for some of the patterns, some could be 1 measure. So it's not going to be tied directly to the length of the pattern, and if you get to the pattern, you could have the pattern just kind of automatically repeat depending on different settings that you have, but you can't quantize it to the downbeat so that when you switch patterns, it will automatically, you know, go directly on the bar. So see, just comment says this Cubase Club is very helpful for all Steinberg users. Very quick answer. So. All right, so we see Quellen just asks, when I press L, listen, is it possible to record the outcoming sound of the effects channel to a Cubase audio track? All right, so let's come over here and say, just... All right, so let's say if we want this, and let's say we have reverb on this particular track. Right, and this is going into this reverb here. I started losing sight my place. All right, so if I actually just wanted to, you know, so you don't have to record it in real time, you know, what you could do is just come over and we'll say, let's export audio mix down. And I just want to find the reverb channel. So we'll go to my effects channel and we'll say, okay, here's our RoomWorks reverb. And we'll say, let's just export, and I'm going to create an audio track. And I'll just, before I do this, let's select kind of our left and right locators around the event. So just say export audio mix down. We just select our reverb. We'll create an audio track, export audio. And I'm going to just turn off real-time export. be much faster otherwise. All right, so now when we come to the bottom, we could just have our reverb rendered, and I'm going to make sure we don't have this selected or that armed. So just do it one more time. Operator error on my part. And now we could just listen to only the reverb.
I started losing sight.
Then you could just isolate the reverb just like that if you wanted to.
What dimension am I in?
So you don't have to record it in real time. You can just export and render the file back in. Okay, reading through questions. Okay, so we see from Nick. So we see Nick ask, there was an update the other day for RetroLog, but I only found out by chance when checking the forum. Are there any plans to change the way we are informed of updates? If not, feature requests. So it's kind of going into like a bigger, kind of almost like a software center, I think is kind of what the plans are. But generally, you could always just, periodically check when you are in your, Steinberg download assistant, and here, once you open up your Steinberg download assistant, that you could go to My Updates. Once you have that enabled, so once you have the Steinberg download assistant. Now it's going to update, but you'll just, and we showed this in a question related to Soren, I think last week. But you'll see as soon as this is, okay, I'm going to cancel the update for now. But as soon as you're kind of as soon as you come over here, you should see, like, I don't have any updates, but you'll see your updates just listed right here, and then you could just check the different updates and make sure that you have this. So maybe check on Sundays or something and look for updates and make sure you have everything installed. I think it'll be migrating where it'll be more obvious for users and things will be centralized, but sometimes it's easier to start off that way instead of migrating millions of customers over to new systems that take a little while. Okay, so Patrick Emanuel A asks, Greg, is there any faster to program for swing, like any simple way the pros use? You find it's a great idea. So, if you have just a very, a number of people will just, program the swing in and quantize it. But a lot of people will also just, let's say if I want to take a particular pattern here, so let's say all right, so say, okay, now I play this, and an easy way is just to kind of come over here and say, okay, I want to open up even the quantizer plugin. So let's say as we play, and you could have a swing factor here. And here you could just make an adjustment to it and find the swing that you like. So if you want just a little tiny bit of swing or varying degrees, so that way you could audition it in real time. So you see a lot of pros using just a quantizer plugin just for that. All right, so we see from Daniela Tocan, says the color is how to set it to white. Black is very uncomfortable for me. So if you wanted like the background here to be white, go to preferences, and we could just go to color schemes. So here we could say, okay, my project area background, I just want this to be more white. If that's what you want, you can come over and now have the program have a white background. So if you just come to your preferences, you can have the editor backgrounds, and you could come over here and set different settings. So if you want it to be more bluish, again, you can just come over and change the different options right there. So I'll just get to my defaults and apply, but check out like the project area background, the editor area background, cycle region, grid lines. You could adjust all those different aspects. Always wonderful to see Graham Witcher from Royal Wooten Bassett. Glad you can make it this afternoon or evening for you. All right, always great to see Lawrence Koch from Rhode Island. Glad you can make it this afternoon. All right, we have Rouge Green just checking in from South UK. All right, so we see a question from Elijah Brown. Greetings, Gregundo. Question, how to set automation to add a sound effect or an audio track? So, if you want to add a sound effect, so let's say if I'm here, I have this track selected, and let's say my cursor is at measure 6. When I go to my loops and sounds, let's say I go to my game sound effects, I can now just double click, and we could have we could just add the sound track, we could add the sound effect. We could also just drag and drop. So if you wanted to drag and drop sound effects, you could do stuff like that very easily. Okay. And then if you want, so like if I just double click on like my sound effect here, we can see that it automatically will just add it onto the particular track like so. So it will just place it and create a new track and carry the name over. So any sound that you have here as the audition. I say I like this particular sound, just double click, and then you could have the track automatically created just like that. So let me know if that's helpful for what you want to do. All right, so we see from Ritesh Gandhi. Hi, Greg. Question. I was trying to tempo detection feature, but it seems either I'm doing something wrong or it seems to be a bug because when I try to set detection from tempo, it randomly works and fails. Can you explain the tempo detection and setting definition to tempo? Thank you in advance. All right, so I'll just take kind of just a random file here. So we'll do a new project. And we'll import an audio file. Okay, so make sure this is not going to kill everyone volume-wise. All right, so it's not following the tempo. All right, so what we want to do is we'll select it and get a project to tempo definition, or to detect tempo detection rather, analyze. All right. I'll take it off loop. So you can see almost every beat is fluctuating in tempo. Now, if you run into, like, as you're playing, if you run into issues with it, one of the things could be that, it'll switch, it'll put you directly into the time warp tool. So if you say, okay, I really need, the downbeat is here instead. What this will do, while you leave this window open, you could say, and leave this window open and this activated here. At that point, you can say, okay, I want, this is the downbeat here. And it's going to do an analysis from that point onward. But you have to make sure that you're in warp grid mode. There's 3 different warp modes now. And make sure that you're in warp grid mode and that you could just, you could manually adjust, and then it will then kind of do a tempo analysis. So let's say we're happy with the results here. I'm going to switch to my object selection tool. And it's doing this by figuring out the beat, and we want to define where the downbeat is. If there's pickup notes, which happens a lot at the start of songs. So we have that tom fill, and I'll just come over here. I'll just enable my snap and say this is where our 4/4 starts. So that's kind of how you could get tempo detection to work and have everything kind of follow right along. So let me know if you did the same approach. And sometimes, depending on the music, if there's, all sorts of different rhythmic things going on, that may hinder its abilities to work. So. All right. Okay, so we see maybe just a follow-up question from Sir Mrs. It's a menu that pops up on the left side of the MIDI editor. It has something that says legato at the top and some other stuff. All right, so let's look at it. we'll see if I could remember what the original topic was. It was probably 20 minutes ago. Happens sometimes. All right, so let's activate this project. All right, so say I'm in the MIDI editor. All right, let me see if I can remember. Yeah, it's always helpful if you kind of refer to something, or it may be a while before I get to it. And if you leave a comment, if you could always leave just a little hint as to what the original comment was, just for my context. Trying to remember what the original question was. Let me see if I could scroll up and find it quickly. Okay, so it says, came across a length editor yesterday and I was wondering how it's used. Okay, so let me just scroll back. Okay, so okay, so a lot of times this might be for, let me just, for more like legato functions. So let's say I want it. So if I have like these notes selected, we could do stuff like, you see how the notes are going to elongate until the next note starts. So you could do different functions like this. And if you wanted these notes, so if we adjust this, we can move the notes until the next note starts. But we could also have an overlap so that each of the notes can then overlap if needed. So you could adjust for it to overlap. So if this sound is doing something at the very end and you want to capture that sound doing it, what it does at the end with the attack of the next note. So thanks for the clarification on that. So that's kind of what the length in a MIDI editor will allow you to do. Okay, so we have a question from Ivan from Ukraine, who asks, is there any chance to rearrange the tools bar, split cut, because it caused numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 on the keyboard not following the toolbar? All right, so let's say we go, 1, 2, 3. Let me just make this the active window here. I think that these often will, you could change the particular keyboard shortcut if you wanted to. Like a lot of times it could be that people need the eraser and the glue tool, more than the drawing tool. And some of these are kind of, as tools have been added over the time, we didn't want to necessarily change people's, particular, like muscle memory to access those particular keys. But if we go to the key commands, so we'll go to edit menu to key commands, and I think if we go to under tool, that you could assign these key commands for, to be in order if you wanted to. So I think it may have been in order previously, but as time goes on, more tools are added as well. All right, so we see from RM says, big thanks for your support and great videos anyways. So glad to be helpful. Okay, so we see from sees just a question from, I guess it's Paki Poli or Paki Poli. Hi, sorry, but I'm going crazy. I need to know how to render my Superior Drummer 3 on Cubase in mono and stereo tracks according to my needs. So it really depends. Probably, if the instrument itself only has stereo outs, then it's going to render as stereo. And I know a lot of people want to render to mono for, kick and snare. They want to render to mono, but what you're actually hearing in the drums, and most people want to preserve what they're hearing in the drums. So what you're hearing is in fact stereo. So it makes sense to, when you render the file and you're hearing it in stereo, that it renders a stereo file so that it sounds the same and doesn't sound different. So if we want to set up a condition, I'll just do new project. And I don't have Superior Drummer 3 on this computer, but I will come over. Let's do something very similar. Groove Agent. All right, so okay, so I'm just going to drag this pattern out. Okay, so let's say we listen to this, and now everything is going out of one stereo out. Okay, so now if we want to take this, I want to this point in this, I'm sure that Superior Drummer has something similar where we're going to take our stereo out here. So let's go to our instrument and a Groove Agent. We can say, and all right, so I want to take this and route it to output 2. All right, so now when we play, the kick is going out of output 2. And so if we solo this particular output here, all right, so now when we're hearing this, it's not in mono, even though people think of mono as being like a kick and snare as being in mono, but it's actually stereo that's going out. So I'm going to take this particular output, we'll open this up, and let's see if I could just send this to a group. Okay. And we'll make it a mono group. Go to stereo out. Okay, so I'm just going to go to send this to our mono group now. We'll see if that. All right, so I want to add an audio track. And we're going to set the input as a group. We're going to make it mono. All right, and now I'm going to just record. So we're basically routing that output to a mono group, the mono group to a mono input, and then so, but realize that, you know, what you're hearing from the instrument will most likely be stereo. And that's why you have to kind of jump through this, because it's outputting stereo. You're hearing stereo, but if you wanted to render it as mono, is just simply take the output, send it to a mono group, and then take that group as the input for different audio channels and just hit record. And then you could take the kick and transfer it over just like that. So if I wanted to now come over and let's mute the kick drum. So there's a subtle difference, but it is different, and that's why, you know, there's going to be a distinction between why it kind of puts you into stereo, because it wants the rendered file. The intention is that the rendered file would be the same and sound the same as what you're hearing from the instrument without doing anything special. So, but give that a try. Let me know if it makes sense. And how you get the outputs, I'm sure you could do the same thing in Superior Drummer, but ask yourself if you really want to, or, you know. All right, so we see from Brian Sawyer Senior question, is it possible to pre-listen to a MIDI file in the media listing like you can in audio listing? So I think if it's a MIDI loop, now MIDI loops, when we come over here, and you'll get a number of them with SQL, a MIDI loop itself will have, you know, it's going to be basically a MIDI file, like a single track, that's going to be just kind of actually store the original sound. So let's say, okay, now I want to come over here. So when we load this up, so as we do this, and it may take like a second because it has to load the instrument. So you could do that, but you know, generally MIDI files don't really have, it's just the data, and they don't necessarily have any assignments, you know. So like your drums could play back piano, and your piano could play back on a drum sound, depending. But if it's a MIDI loop, and you know, if I wanted to save this as a MIDI loop, we would just come over here and export. So we get a file to export MIDI loop, and then once we have a MIDI loop, that automatically retains what instrument is used to play back that MIDI information, so it makes sense, and those can be auditioned. All right, so my chat field jumped on me. Okay, seeing more questions about the mono drum routing. All right, so we see question, when I save a project and open it later, the audio files for the samplers tracks are missing. So I'm not sure if, like, when you go to add a sampler track, you know, there's a preference that you could utilize. It's always a good thing to have on. So we go to your Cubase preferences, or edit preferences if you're on Windows, and we'll go to editing audio. Is that we will On import audio files, one of the things you could do is just check copy all files to project folder. So now if I have this particular project, and let me just check my project folder here. I'll just go to all right, so we'll call this project July 21, 2023. All right, so now when I go to and we look at our pool window, we're not going to see any, so we have the one audio file that we just rendered. Okay, so when I drag a particular sample in, so let's say I now come over and I want that in the sampler track. So now when I create a sampler track and we go to our pool window, we could see that we'll have our sampler track in the audio file, and that file will be saved within the project. So, and if so if you're not seeing it, and you didn't save the sampler track as a preset, try just to go to this preference. And this is always a good thing that, anytime that you want to go to editing to audio, that anytime you drag a file over, that it will, copy it to the project folder, and then everything would be placed in one common folder, and you save the project and it knows exactly where the particular samples are. See, RM just says, big thanks, Greg, for your answers to my questions from today. So you're welcome, and that's why we do these, to help people out. All right, so we see Dallas LaRue just says, update 12.07. The first 3 times it wouldn't open, said no license found. It finally opened and it took forever for it to load. Is that normal? Sometimes when you have a new version, it will kind of rescan plugins. So if it's looks like it's hung, it could be like a plugin window that's behind the Cubase splash screen, and it could be saying, this plugin has expired. Do you want to continue using it? Do you want to authorize it? So it could be different aspects with that as well. So that's often what happens in that scenario. All right, so we see from Jesse Jose, says, yeah, that have a question. All right. Feel free to ask it. All right, so I think I see the question here. All right, so we see see the question. I've already looked around in the manual, but do you know of any ways to offset MIDI input latency in the same manner that we offset recording input latency in samples? So it could really depend, if you're doing virtual instruments and you have the first thing to try is to figure out why there's the latency. So is the latency caused by the buffer? So if you're playing virtual instruments, you could go to your audio interface and see the buffer and see if that is what is causing the latency. That could lower latency. And if you have plugins in your project, realize that when you start to add plugins, that plugins themselves can impose latency. We'll consider it almost kind of a latency tax. So if I wanted to go to my VST effects, and this is always a good one, my multiband compressor, that we could see the latency in samples right here for each plugin. So if you have a lot of plugins like on your master bus, that could be causing latency. And when we have plugins on your master bus that maybe you wanted to bypass, to get rid of, or to temporarily disable that are incurring a lot of latency, we could go to the constrained delay compensation here. And what that'll do is shut off plugins that have latency, and every time you add these plugins, it's going to add to the latency. And as you play MIDI in from a virtual instrument, it's going to be the audio stream is being processed through that plugin, incurring the latency, and then we could bypass latent plugins by activating the constrained delay compensation. On Windows, sometimes you may run into, depending upon the MIDI driver and how it was written, you may have to go to Studio Setup and then go to MIDI port setup. And on the Windows platform, it's not, and it's kind of a Windows specific thing. You may see use direct music ports, enable system timestamp. So if you notice that, like when you play directly in time and it's being, as you record, it's being early or late, you may want to adjust the settings in your, for using system timestamp or use direct music ports. You may have to play around with those depending upon your MIDI interface driver. So give those things a try, so see if you can figure out what's causing the latency. If it's buffer, if it's plugins, then you could adjust that. And then it could be, if you're on Windows, it could also be like, using the system timestamp, the Windows system timestamp, or using, the direct music ports. So you have a couple of different options there. All right, so we see from Daniela Tocan, just ask, are there no templates for color? Really like the change from the earlier version. This color is all. The design now is awful with the black. How to get the old design. So it's really once you set the preferences, and you could set a number of different parameters for the preferences, and then you could store the preferences as a preset so that every time you start up Cubase, all of your settings or color schemes could all be recalled for you. So we see from Jesse Jose, says, wait, new Cubase update available now. So the current version is going to be 12.07. So that's the latest one. So if you don't have that, it's a free download. All right, so we have Neil Conway just saying hey to everyone. So glad you can make it today. Okay, so we see Ritesh Gandhi ask, thanks Greg for explaining the tempo detection. Can you also explain now how to set the definition from tempo so that it will follow musical mode and follow any tempo changes I do? Thanks. Yeah, let's see if we saw the project open. Yeah, all right. So let's say our tempo here is fluctuating. And let's say I want them, and we look at our tempo values, we're like between 120, 124. So let's say I just want this to be perfect 120 beats a minute. So perfectly dead steady. So what I want to do, and I can do this for a single file, a single event, or I could do it for multiply selected events. We will go to our audio to advanced. All right, and when we look at our tempo information here, we can see different tempo values for every single beat. And what I want to do, instead of having this file with one single tempo metadata, I'm going to go to audio to advanced, and we're going to choose to set definition from tempo. And what that's going to do is basically we could do this and store it in the project or embed it within the audio file. So as soon as we do this, what it's going to do is take all of the tempo information here in this particular tempo detection, and apply that as metadata. So now what I want to do is to have it not follow the tempo changes. So I'll come over here and say let's play 120. So I can see the original tempo. And let's say, okay, let's make it even 124. Or 132. $140. 160. And if I wanted to have tempo changes, I could even come over to my tempo field here. Let's do a new version, and we'll say, okay, we want to start at 120. And we can say, okay, as we go into the chorus, so let's say our tempo is going to be like right here. I want it to speed up during the chorus. So we'll just then I can say right here at this point, I want when it goes to the verse, I want that to go back to the original tempo. So at this point, we could just speed up that little part of the song. Give it a little more tension. And then back to our original tempo. So you could just do like really subtle tempo changes to kind of add a little rhythmic, just to like kind of a little more tension in the track. So kind of like a tension release. So it's a wonderful tool for that. All right, so we see a question from Patrick Emmanuel A. Greg, what's the easiest ways to draw automation? Easy way to move them, because sometimes it's very hard. Okay, so let's say I want to come over here and I'm going to just draw in some automation. So, one of the things you could do is just, if we have our automation values here, if I activate the automation, so I'm going to just turn on read. So at this point, what I want to do is just say, if I want to do a volume change here, I could just draw. So just using the range tool, I could just draw in, adjust my volume range here. If we use the line tool, we could just switch it to our line tool. And then, if I wanted to draw in different automation changes, we could do that. If I wanted to do like a straight linear fade in, we could have your automation values set like that. If we wanted to adjust kind of the Bezier curve, we could just go between 2 points, and we'll see that as we hover between those 2 points, that we could actually just come right over there and set up different curves. Now, if we want to copy this automation or duplicate it, I could use my range selection tool, and I'll just say, okay, we could duplicate the particular automation. If I wanted to take all of the automation values here, I could select it with the object selection tool, and then we could increase or decrease the values. I can tilt the automation like so. I could also compress or expand the differences in automation, but just, come over here using the pencil tool, you could draw it in, or using the line tool. Pretty straightforward. So let me know if that makes sense, and if there's anything else you wanted to see in regards to automation, Patrick, be happy to show you. So wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Glad you can make it today. Everyone's now anxious for their ice cream distribution. All right, so wonderful to see Bruce Bruton on from Simi Valley, California. Neil Conway's pulling out his high school German skills. I was impressed. See, Jesse Jose just says there's so much to learn in Cubase. Seriously, it's been a 5-year learning process. So it's like no matter how many times, how long you play an instrument, it's always a learning process. I saw Peter Frampton in concert last night, and he's 73 and he's still learning new stuff on guitar. So it's inspiring to watch. So think of it like a musical instrument that you'll never ever perfect. Know everything. All right, so Daniela Tokan or Wilfried asks, today's a Zoom meeting or next week? So it'll be our Zoom meetup will be next Friday, a week from today, on July 28th. So we'll probably do 2 hours of our normal Club Cubase live stream, and then we'll have 2 or 3 hours of the Zoom get together afterwards. So it'll be 1 week from today on July 28th, 2023. All right, so we see from Jesse Jose says, I just want to figure out the MIDI compensation or MIDI offset without having to lower the buffer size too much. So again, figure out what is it the buffer size, or is it plugins, or is it your MIDI interface? But generally, there shouldn't be like a MIDI offset that's required. So. But you could figure it out from one of those 3 sources. More than likely. All right, so we have a question. Is it possible to change the position of tracks in the mix window? For example, to move violin closer, audio 08 track. So currently in the mix window, we can't drag and drop and change the order here, but you can just, come over and change the order of tracks. So let me just add some more tracks in this project here. So if I want to take this track and move it, we could just drag it right from our project window, and then it's automatically updated in the mix console. All right, my chat field just jumped on me. Sorry about that. All right, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions and great comments. And if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you do hit the like button or like the service that you get and support. All right, so Samir Shah asks, hi, can you show me if we want to export stems with processing channels, how do we do that? Okay, so let me just, I think I may have a project that's kind of set up for this. Let me see if I have one kind of set up. All right, well, all right, I know we just open up our project. It's kind of set up already. Sorry, I just thought of another one. All right, so I'll just do just a quick small section, a couple measures for time's sake. All right. All right, so let's say I have in this so let's say, we have piano going on. All right, we have our melody. All right, so our guitar has reverb and delay, it sounds like. We'll just come over here. So yeah, reverb, delay. All right, so when we want to export with and retain the effects, so I'm going to come over here. Let's do an export audio mix down. I'm going to select, let's say, the bass. We'll do Groove Agent. I'm going to choose multiple first. So we'll say, okay, let's go to bass, Groove Agent, and let's go to the melody. Okay. And when we see this, we could just say, okay, I want to, on the effects, we could include the inserts and channel strip. So we could have this disabled, but we could also just say, I want my groups and send effects. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to, when I export, we're going to put it into new tracks. So we'll say, let's create an audio track here. And what we're going to do is just do a quick batch export with all of these, my Groove Agent, the bass, and the melody. So we'll export audio. Okay, so now we'll go to the bottom of our project here and we'll listen to the individual tracks. So now you hear the reverbs are embedded. So no effects on the bass. And let's get to the melody. I probably had the melody selected for I probably have it record enabled when I did it, but that's how you could just simply come directly to and at that point you can hear how the effects are just included right there with like the drums. So really all you need to do is come over to when you go to export audio mixdown, and you'll see the effects. Just choose what effects that you actually want to have included there. All right. All right, reading through comments and questions. All right, great to see Capital Razor on. All right, so reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. You see Peter just clarifying probably the terminology I misspoke of. Just saying in Windows that would be the use system timestamp for Windows MIDI inputs. So look for that. All right, you see that Michael Teams has offered Peter Montreal a gallon of root beer float using Dad's root beer today. So that's good. All right, so we see Bruce Bruton just has says question. I like to use the number 1 key to reset the playhead back to the beginning, but occasionally it gets reset to somewhere else. How do I get it back to number 1 to set playhead back to the beginning? Simple, I'm sure, but if you want to do it, just go to the key commands, and then so let's go to our key commands, and probably the function you're looking for already has a key. It's not the 1 key, but the period key on a numeric keypad, and you want to set transport to go to project start. So where you have the numeric keypad, if you have a numeric keypad on your computer keyboard, which I always recommend because there's such great Cubase functions in there, if you just click on the period key, that will do the same thing. It may not be the 1 key, but this is the function. If you go to under transport, you'll see go to project start, but there is a keyboard shortcut that is assigned to that already. So maybe if you incorporate that existing keyboard shortcut, that could help you out, Bruce. Okay, so we see Ritesh Gandhi just says, thanks a lot for explaining tempo detection in detail. So I'm glad to help. Hopefully that will help. Yeah, Michael Pierce is saying the decimal key on the keypad. So yeah. All right, so Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream. And it just says, thanks for a great hangout. You're a fantastic resource and helped me so much. Thank you so much for the kind words, Michael. Appreciate it. Looking forward to playing bass on some new tunes for you. So. Okay, so we see a question from Peter. It says, was it Peter Frampton that either lost or is losing his hearing? So his hearing is really good. He has a condition called inner body myositis. So it basically has kind of a weakening of his muscles. So he has a hard time, walking like lengths, great lengths. So he's kind of walking with a cane. So it was kind of really interesting. He did the whole concert sitting down, and the whole band was seated, and it really actually kind of drew the audience in and more to the music. So he's like, his legs are a little weaker, and he's had this for a while, and he was retiring from touring because he didn't think he'd be able to do it, and then he did one gig sitting down, and it kind of worked out for him. He did a European leg last fall, and I think there's a PBS special in the United States that you could watch on it, where from the Royal Albert Hall in London, where him and the band are just all seated, but there's no real change in energy in the playing or anything. So like, he thought he was retired, and he's like, wait, my fingers are still working. Maybe his legs aren't, but he so he wants to go out and play as much as he can. So it's not a hearing problem, but just kind of almost like a degenerative muscle disease called IBM, inner body myositis, I think is what it is. But he's incredibly upbeat and happy to still be able to go out and play, and it was like just an amazing concert. So if you get a chance to see Peter Frampton in your area, please do. All right. David M. says, learning an instrument that he perfected it by putting it back in its case. All right. Okay, so we see from Martin, he just says, can't find superior drummer question anymore, but for mono outputs, go to the SD settings to advanced, available in Cubase Nuendo, only use 32 mono outputs, and there you go. So okay, so we see from Neil Conway, is Nuendo really a superset of Cubase? So it used to be that there were some differences, like some Cubase features not in Nuendo and vice versa, and then after a while it didn't really make that much sense. So we could think of Nuendo as Cubase plus more additional features, and again, that could be more for post-production, including ADR tools, reconforming, and lots of game audio production and some sound design stuff. All right, so we have Dr. Ing Manuel Ramsier's is a little bit late today. Had to watch an Oceans movie with his wife, so we're glad he can make it. And thanks for joining us today. All right, and we see Spike Williams checking in from Rhonda, Wales. Great to see you. Very loyal attendee. We appreciate you being here. All right, so Frederic asks, hi Greg, Fred from France. How do I access the Zoom meeting? Is there a link or a meeting available? Thank you very much. So usually what we do is we provide the link during the meeting, so that people are in the meeting. But if you want to email me, I'd be happy to share the link, and you could reach me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So if you send me an email, I'll go ahead and create the Zoom meeting early and share the link with you. So it'll be probably 3 p.m., so like 1 week minus 25 minutes from right now. So 3 p.m. next Friday. And we see just kind of a follow-up question to, is Nuendo a superset of Cubase? Are there times to prefer one over the other? So I would say if you're doing functions, like if you were doing stuff that's, in both programs, that they're going to function identically. It's when you would prefer one over the others if you're doing specific tasks that were only available in Nuendo. But, for for the functionality between them, if I opened up new window now, you'd say, oh, it looks just like Cubase. But it does that plus more, very specialized workflows. Reading through comments. Yeah, so we see Spike Williams says he always uses number 1 and number 2 to jump to left and right locators, an old habit, but it works. Yeah, so if you're using number 1 and 2 on the numeric keypad, those default to the left and right locators. But often number 1 on above, on the American keyboard, Q, W, E, R, T, Y, the numbers, without the numeric keypad, those will kind of switch between the tools. All right, so we have Book of Taliesin asks, are there any ideas about the next Cubase version? So I'm sure there are a lot of ideas. So, but generally, Steinberg doesn't like to do the tease on the customers. Doesn't really do anyone any good announcing stuff months before it comes out. So it'll be announced when it's ready to ship. But rest assured that there are many people that are always working, and if the next version is Cubase 13, that there's people already planning Cubase 14 and 15 and etc. So it's a non-stop process. But as soon as it's available, we'll be happy to do kind of a specialized live stream to show it to everyone. But yeah, lots of ideas about it. All right, so wonderful to see Gareth has made the live stream. All right, so 3/4 of Hot Mess present. Hope you're doing well, Gareth. All right, so I think we're at the end of questions in the chat. We'll see if there's any more questions pop up, and we'll go to some of the questions that were sent in advance. Give it a second. All right, so let's go ahead and everyone's happy to see Gareth from Spain. All right, so let me go to some of the questions that were mailed in. All right, so we had a copy. How to copy multiple inserts from one track to another. Okay, so let's say if I'm in my inserts here, I'll just load up a quick track preset. Okay, so let's say I have all right, I'll get to my inserts this time. That will help. Sorry. Okay, so we have our inserts here. So let's say I wanted to copy these inserts, like these 3 inserts from this track over to this track. So I think if we just grab them, and let's hold down the Alt or Option key, or you don't even have to hold down the Alt or Option key. But if you if we're in the inserts here, we could just drag and drop, and you could have all the insert settings. So if you split something that was a stereo track to 2 mono tracks and you want the same processing, select from, if you hover over the top here in the kind of to the right there, you'll see it turn to a hand. And when you see that, just then grab it with the left mouse button, move it over, and release. And then you could just have those particular inserts just like so. Okay, I'm just open up a new project for this, so it'll be a little more clear. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to copy plugins with automation in Cubase? All right, so I'm going to just create 2 tracks here. Okay, and we'll come over to this track, and let's open up an insert. All right, so I'm going to automate this particular insert. Okay, so let's say I wanted to copy the, let's say the threshold settings. All right, so when I copy this insert over to this track, so let's say I moved it. I'll undo that. Let me just Alt Option Z. All right, I think I undid my automation. Out-clevered myself. All right, so we'll automate this again. Okay, so we have automation on the insert of this track, and we want it to be on this track. So what's kind of, while you think that the automation is tied to the insert, the automation is actually residing directly on the track itself. So if you wanted to copy that insert over, again, we could utilize kind of the same function here. And so, but when we do that, there's not going to be any particular function. None of the automation will carry over. So let's say we want to go to threshold. So because the automation itself resides in the particular track and not with the plugin. So if we wanted to now, so it had to be kind of a 2-step process. So if I come to the automation, let's just select all, I could copy, and then we'll go to this automation, track, paste, and enable read, and then we could have kind of the same automation. But the automation itself goes through the plugin, but it's not actually part of the plugin. So when we move the plugin, the automation stays. And the automation is actually part of the particular track. So that's why it's kind of a 2-step process. So moving this over, when I move this effect over to another track, this is just moving the effect as opposed to, and not copying the automation, because the automation is on the track, and the track will then send that automation through the plugin. So it's going to be kind of a two-step process to copy the automation and the plugin. So because they're kind of two different sources for the information. All right. So we see a question that was mailed in. Is it possible, or will it ever be possible, to input your own chord name / symbols, i.e. C5 or C add 9 instead of C9? So yeah, we could do this already. So generally, if it's like a C5, like, you know, I realize that this is a common power chord, like let's say C, you know, probably the most widely used guitar chord. You know, technically I wouldn't call it a chord because a chord is 3 or more notes. So that's why there isn't like a C5 chord, because technically it would be a dyad, D-Y-A-D, if my memory serves me well from college music theory. So chord's going to require 3 notes. But when we go to our chord track here, and we'll add a chord track. All right, and we'll just choose like a C9 chord. Okay, so as we put this in, we'll see. So when we choose a C9 chord, it will look like this. But if you want it to say C add 9 instead of C9 like this, you go to the preferences, and it's going to be under event display, and then I think it's chords here, and then we have kind of custom chord symbols. So let's create a new custom chord. So we'll say, okay, I want to include the 5th, the major 3rd, and the 9th. Okay, so I'll just come over here. So I think if we just choose add 9 and hit apply, that now if you look at it, you could have it as C add 9. You could also, so now every time that you put a 9th chord in, that's how the 9th chord would be displayed. So you could do it like that. Now you could also, if you wanted to tweak it a little bit, depending on visual preferences, you could say also, I just want to get rid of the tension, not include that, and we'll say C add 9 here, and I think this would maybe just display it slightly differently. So here we could have the 9 kind of smaller if you want to see it like that, or again, just keep the tension. So come over to event display, to audio, to chords, and you want to add a new custom chord and define, say, okay, this for a major chord. So every time we go to like a C9 chord, we would say we want to include the major 3rd, the perfect 5th, and the 9th, the major 9th. So at this point, hit apply, and that way it will turn out to be the add 9 chord as opposed to C9 or F9. And then so you could have that set up for different scenarios. So just remove the custom chord. And again, the C5, you may not see that because you know, technically it's not 3 distinct chord tones. So all right, so we see question, will it ever be possible to customize button colors on Cubase IC Pro beyond the default color palette? I'll never say never, but currently it's not set up for that, I believe. But I could pass it along as a feature request for that. And kind of along those same lines, will it ever be possible to customize button size in Cubase IC Pro? So, you know, I think it's kind of tries to be, you know, consistent depending upon, I think sometimes when you get into customizing the buttons, if you go between, let's say, an iPad and your iPhone, that you want to have kind of the same uniform experience. So I haven't heard of any plans. I will be in Germany in September, so I might be meeting with the team then, and I could pass along that request then. But it could be problematic switching between different devices. Okay, so we see a question mailed in. Hi, Greg. Are you aware of any issues with MIDI remote stop working? I map my keyboard controller and it works fine for a few sessions. Then the map is just unresponsive, and the only thing that fixes it is making a new map from scratch. Thank you. So the first thing I would try is I'll go to my MIDI remote session, my MIDI remote template here. And I think I have one that's kind of set up. All right. So I think I could come over here and so let's say I don't actually have this device. I can get rid of that. All right, so here I created one for like a choy sauce controller. And I think that we could choose to. So the one thing that I would try to do is, let's say, okay, like here's an 8 fader box. It's one of my favorites, just a quick choy sauce controller, so 8 faders. So what I would do is, as we go into the setup here, the thing that I would try to do is just when we go to the script here is maybe, I haven't had mine kind of go off and on at all, but it could be maybe if there's another part of, the something else that's kind of taking over the MIDI script, but try to come over here and you could, and you'll see disable controller script, and then you could enable the controller script. So instead of having to redo it all the time, let me know if you've actually tried to simply disable and enable the particular controller script right there. So like I don't actually have this Akai controller, so I'm going to disable this script. So you go to the scripts tab and I'll just disable this, but I do have my Choy Sauce 100 and my Korg Nano control. So again, try going to the this little settings cogwheel here and to the MIDI remote manager, click on the scripts tab, enable disable script, and see if you get it to wake up. You could always export the script also. So let's say if we are in our Choy Sauce, we could come here and let's say we go to our script, we could export the script and then re-import the script, and that should be starting from kind of a brand new like a brand new instance of it. But make sure that there's nothing else that's utilizing that same MIDI port that could be conflicting with it. So if it's set up in a generic remote or something like that, that could have an impact as well. Okay, so we see a question. Hello, is there any way to get 7.1 Windows audio into Cubase virtually? And I think what this was, I had an email exchange with the person that sent the question, was they wanted to play Netflix as 7.1 or as surround through using their Audient controller and then but they couldn't go into the Windows control panel to tell the audience to function as a surround output as opposed to a stereo output. So, really the only way to get that to work would be, perhaps if you have surround on your motherboard audio output, and this is really kind of outside of Cubase, if the audio interface driver isn't allowing you to use it as a surround export, it's kind of out of Cubase's realm. A long workaround could be, and this may not be what you want to do, is to take outputs from your motherboard. If it's like a PC with like a tower, like a desktop unit, I know my motherboard I think has 7.1 audio output and mini jacks, so like 4 little mini jacks. You could route the audio through there, take that audio connection, feed it into your audio interface. But it seems like a bit of a long way to go to approach that. All right, I think I saw maybe an email come in from David, so let me see if I could find that quickly. If we get to it. All right. All right, so we see this from David Mather. It says, "Hi Greg, using SpecLayers 10 inside Cubase 12, none of my edit settings save, so it's not ready to continue editing when I open Cubase the next time. The settings mostly do when using SpecLayers in standalone, though not the resolution and refinement settings, at least my composite view settings and zoom settings. I'm guessing it's not possible to make those settings save when using SpecLayers inside Cubase. Is that what you think?" All right, so let's just take a quick look. So let's take a look at one of the files here, see if we still have that one open. Okay, so I want to take this file. All right, so now we will go ahead and take a look. So let's say if I come over here to the view, I want to have my composite view. All right, and let's say, let me switch it to the composite view. All right, but I think that, so let's see if we save this. Close that project and all right, now there may be a preference. I want to say, like if it's like it's just setting the composite view, I think that there might be just I'm not sure if it works in ARA, but let me just. Just seeing if I thought this may only work in standalone. Okay, so default display mapping. All right, so let's say if we do this as spectral layers, let's see if it shows up. Yeah, so if it's kind of doing, if you want it to be the composite view, maybe check out again the preferences in spectral layer and see if, and go to display, if that so let's just see, and the resolution. So maybe try those particular settings and save it in the preferences, and let me know if that helps with your situation, David. All right, let me jump back to some of the let's see if I think we may have gotten one more email in during the live stream. Okay, I think we just covered that. All right, so let me just jump back to our live chat. Thanks for all the questions. Again, you could always email questions into clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, just finding my spot. Okay, so all right, so you just see from Elijah Brown how to set automation, though sound effect, audio track for doing effects. All right, so let's say if I have a quick sound effect. So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I'll try another attempt at it. All right, so let's say I want to take that sound effect there, and as we listen to it, I want to do like some, for doing effects, so say, so if I just wanted to select that, and let's come over, if we wanted to do automation for an effect, so let's say we'll just go to like an insert, and let's find something creative. We'll say pitch shift. All right, so we'll just so we have, so I'm gonna stretch this out just a little bit. Okay, but that's maybe too much. All right, so let's say while it's playing, I want to maybe find a longer. Okay, we'll try this one. Okay, so we could automate something here. So let's say alright, so let's say I want to take this and we'll automate this octaver on it. So, I mean, you could do stuff like that, or if we say, okay, I want to take this and let's put, here, we'll do something really more interesting. We'll do like a multi-tap delay. And then while this is going on, so, but let me know if I'm kind of missed any automation that you want to put on. You can put any effect and any automation on it. You could also just, if you want to do kind of offline processing on the event, I could take this and, you know, let's say I want to put a flanger on it or something. I could go to audio to process. We could go to plugins and we could choose different, you know, so let's say I'll do a filter. You know, we could just come here and apply the morph filter. If you want to change stuff, or if we say let's get audio to processes, and we'll do pitch shift, and I want to take this and we'll set our pitch shift over an octave. So now if I wanted to, so that's some different aspects that you could do. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, or maybe ask in a different way. Sorry if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so you see for Michael Teams, how to import a new color scheme. So generally, colors are migrated over with projects. So if you get a project from someone with a cool color scheme, you can at that point just simply save the color scheme, and if you want to save it as your default color scheme, so open up the project, and then we could go to your project color setup from the project menu, and then once you have, you know, you see like your color set here, we could just go to the options and we could say save color set as default, and then you could just simply, once you have that set up, you could save it as a preset, so that will be your default colors selections that are available for you. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Martin. It says, hey Greg, will you please show the advanced crossfade editor in depth? Thanks and cheers from Hamburg. So, all right, looking forward to going to Hamburg in September, early September. So, all right, let me just open up project here. We can do some crossfades. Okay, so let's say I just want to do some crossfades here. So All right, so I'll just move this track to the top and make it super large. All right, so let's say I've done a edit, and on this album project I did lots of edits on it. So let's say, and on this project I actually, there's at times like 30 different recordings of pieces, and then we had to create a composite of all those different takes, and some of them were slightly different tempos and stuff like that. So often I would take like multiple tracks, and then we would have to do crossfades, because if we're doing our crossfades, and we just turn my snap off here, you may be doing a lot of edits kind of like this. And let me see if I could, so when we look at this, we can see that these two events can be kind of overlapping. So if we listen, this we'll probably hear a little bit, and you may often hear that little click. So when we kind of zoom in, so we listen to the click again. All right, so that's kind of often what we want to avoid. Now let's say we have a crossfade done here, and we want to work on this crossfade. So a lot of times what you would do is hit, you could select the two events that you want to crossfade, hit the letter X, all right, and that will do a crossfade between them. And then you'll often kind of get rid of the click or pop, but you may have to make adjustments. So to go into a more advanced crossfade editor, you could double click. And what this is going to allow you to do is, one, you could see the various, so I'll just kind of zoom in on the waveform. So we could zoom the waveform independently. So if you're working with low level amplitude material, we could see that. We could choose different kind of fade points. I'm going to just zoom in. So if I wanted this to be more logarithmic, or some people really prefer kind of sinusoid crossfade, fades, and we don't have to have these equal. So if we just come over here, we could choose equal gain and equal power. So I could adjust my fade out independently from my fade in. And if I wanted this to be more, less kind of wavy and more kind of distinct, we could adjust kind of the crossfade directly here. Now we are going to have the capability of, we can choose to, audition. Let's see, we could play the fade out. So we come here. And we could kind of, we could play the crossfade. So if you wanted to audition it, just to make sure there weren't going to be any particular elements, so we have kind of independent crossfades, and we could just come over here and slide. Now, one of the things that gets to be really interesting is chaining mode. So remember that I did that crossfade later in the project. So let's say we're doing, we have this crossfade here. So when I'm in chaining mode, as I move this, and this is a really important thing, especially if we do classical music editing. So again, we have the chaining mode. And then with the chaining mode, what that's going to allow us to do, we could have it until end or until gaps or none. So if I need to kind of nudge this event over, it's not going to mess up this crossfade. And that's a really critical thing, because without chaining mode, I'll choose none. I'll move this event over for the crossfade. That the rest of the fades afterward will be messed up. So when we go into here, so here we could see, get a good idea visually what's going on. And with the chaining mode, we can make sure that as we do that, that all the subsequent crossfades aren't going to be totally destroyed when editing a crossfade earlier. So again, we'll have our different lengths for the crossfade. It can be adjusted, for in and out. We could automatically zoom to make sense for kind of like where our crossfade is, if that's checked, so you have a good representation. And then you could just have the project selection follows fade. So if you get to the next crossfade, you can have kind of, you could leave this particular window open. So that's, it's a very powerful, and this is one of the Nuendo features that had migrated down to Cubase, especially for the chaining end, which is like really essential for classical music editing. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Martin. See, everyone likes Chris Slim's color palette, so. All right, so you see from Jazz Dude, and it just says, if I may suggest a question. I did some time today again in the MIDI modifiers and checked the presets. You might show some of the cases and how they would work. I bet a lot of people have never seen these. All right, so let me just go to project that has some of the MIDI modifiers on it that we could use. All right, so when we go to, I'll just revert. Sorry to hear my son running above me. All right, so there's kind of MIDI modifiers in two areas. So we could have MIDI modifiers here, and here we could have different presets. So, we could do stuff like, okay, I want to take my, I want to be able to transpose my MIDI. I want to be able to velocity shift. So if we have someone, let's say you just want to take all the velocities down by -20, or you could do velocity compression. So as we come over, and if we have like all of our velocity, we'll just look at the velocity here. So if we say, okay, we just want to go to, and we'll just select the MIDI modifier again. So we could do different velocity compression, and we also have different random functions. So if we say, okay, I want to randomize, position. So we can say, okay, I want this to be maximum value, minimum value. So, and these would actually just affect playback until we actually go to your MIDI and go to freeze MIDI modifiers. So at this point, if we have that selected, I'm going to come over here and say, let's do a velocity compression. And we'll make it 59% of our data here. So as we look at this, we can now freeze. I think this should carry it over, freeze MIDI modifiers. And then we can see that the velocity just decreased. And this way we could have a tremendous amount of control over, randomizing, particular things. There's also going to be her mode tuning. So if at this point you wanted to have different temperaments handled, so if you want different tuning scales for VST3 instruments, they could do that. So there's lots of great functions. And you could, pull up the different presets here and experiment with some of the different functions. But a lot of times when people want to randomize things, but they don't want to necessarily change the particular data. At that point, you could just, experiment with the MIDI modifiers and realize that these are only affecting it on playback until you apply the freeze MIDI modifiers from the MIDI menu. All right. See, Gareth has got 1 gallon of Texas chocolate pecan ice cream for him and his daughter Lola. All right, so we see from InDrop, hi Greg, is it possible to create instruments from Halley and Sonic, or do we need the full version of Hallian? I sampled a polyphonic synth and I want to be able to use within Cubase. So generally, that's where Hallian is perfect. We could think of Halley and Sonic as the playback engine, but for sampling and creating your own instruments, that's the perfect use for using Hallian. And then the instruments that you make in Hallian can play back in any Hallian Sonic instrument. So basically every Cubase version, they could be played back through. So, think of it like that. So if you want to create your own instrument and samples, that Hallian is the tool for authoring and doing sound design, all the editing. And then when you want it to sell it or play it back, Hallian Sonic can play back the engine. So Hallian Sonic is the playback portion, and Hallian is the playback portion with the authoring and sampling and creation portion. Right, it's good to learn that Gareth has fed his daughter Lola, so that's great. Tell her we all said hello. See that Gareth's favorite chord is C add 9. It's going to be the only chord in the next Hot Mess song. So. See, David M just says, how does Greg remember all this stuff? Brain the size of a planet. So I'm cursed with a good memory, but you can't really choose. If you have a good memory, you can't really choose what you remember. So it's not always the greatest thing I can remember, just totally random things that don't make any sense to remember. But glad to be able to help people. It's great to see you on, David. We hope that you're able to make the Zoom next week. All right, so we see a question from Uno Memento. How do I hide stereo in fader in the mixing console from the main window down on the left? So let's say we have our mix console here, and there's probably a good chance that we have input channels. So if you want to do that, if you're in the lower zone mixer, you could come here, click on these little 3 dots, and just to the right of like the search, you can click right and just say you want to hide different input types, and you can say I want to hide my input channels. So click here, and then all your input channels will be gone. All right, so we see InDrop just says he's definitely considering investing in Hallian 7. So yeah, it's an incredible tool. So if you're already sampling instruments, it's the best tool for that. So. All right, so we see Gareth just saying never say never again. So I'm not sure if that is the if that's a reference to the Peter Frampton tour, but that's the name of his current tour. he said last night, you may have to never say never again sequel next year if everything is good. All right, still reading through all the comments. You see Michael Pierce is popping in and out. All right, we see Bruce Bruton has to take off, so thanks for joining us today. Hope you're doing well with your health and your appointments. All right, so we see from Best Green Jesus just asks, Greg, mind asking the team about MIDI channel editing for the remote manager when you see the team? So let me know, Best Green Jesus, if it is like, if you want to be able to, like, if you have a MIDI track, to be able to change the MIDI channel through the MIDI remote. Let me know if it's that. Just want to make sure I understand. All right. All right, so we just see, hey, Greg, thanks for your answer. Unfortunately, I formalized my question wrong, so I'm curious about the release date of the next version. So, yeah, generally we're not able to, if I was involved in testing, you know, I would probably be under a non-disclosure agreement, so we can't really talk about when new versions are coming. So, but rest assured it's coming. All right, so we see I see some more discussion between Uno Memento and Gareth about the, like, maybe the channel settings on the lower zone mixer. So we see that we could do the input channels here, but let's go to the visibility settings. So when we go to the visibility zones, you know, so if we wanted to see the let's go to the track here. You know, we could have our input output. So let's see if I have my, so I'll just move this over to the right, and let's see if my input, I'll just do it in a smaller project, but we could have the different zones visible in the, so we could have an independent zone here. So I'll just add a couple of inputs into my audio connections. All right, so I have a number of those, and I'll add, we'll just make it a couple audio tracks. Okay, so now when we go to our visibility tab, we should have, let me see if it's because we don't have anything routed as the input. Okay, yeah, we should. But we can't have, our settings here. As well. So, but if, again, to hide that, try this in the lower zone and let me know if that works for you, Memento. If that's what you wanted to accomplish. You see Jazz Dude just mentioning that Spec Layers 10. It just started a 30-day trial version. So if you wanted to experiment with it. All right, just reading through. All right, so we see Nick is going to have a long day in the studio tomorrow, so look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful weekend and a great session, Nick. Thanks for joining us. All right. Apparently I deleted Gareth's favorite tune, so sorry. You could watch the, I'm sure you could watch the replay and recreate it, so it's all stock. All right, so you see Gareth just saying that the chaining mode is a revelation of the day. So. All right, so we see, my apologies for a question that may have been asked endlessly. We have used Cubase for our live shows and it works great, but is there a way to create separate sub mixes for the monitors, AXR4? So if you, really all you'd have to do is come up to the audio connections and go to the control room, and what you want to do is just right click and you could add a cue mix. So you could have up to 4 cues. So we'll just add these. So let's say we'll have, guitar, drums, and we'll bass. Okay, and what you want to do in the AXR4 is just come over here. We want to define the, basically where the outputs are going. So you have, 8 outputs, or you could take the 8 outputs on the AXR4, and then you could feed them, so you want to say outputs, 1 and 2, outputs 3 and 4, or 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You could use the ADAT connections or the AES connections if needed. So define those. And then once we're in the particular project, you go to like the full screen mixer. And if you go to the racks, make sure that you have cue sends activated. And then when you click on the cues, we can now just come over here and send out. I will, just for expediency's sake, go to my cue link. I'm going to select all these channels. So let's say this is your band across however many channels, and I want these to go out to the bass player, and they need this track So we'll just kind of roughly set it up. Now just take off Q link, and at this point we could say, okay, the bass player needs to hear less of this. So as we take this track and then we send it more to, the drums, more to the bass, less to the guitar. So you could do all of your Q mixes and monitor mixes directly from your Cubase project, so everyone could have perfect headphone or Q mixes for live performance. All right. So let me know if that helps you, Sabra. All right, so we see from Best Green Jesus, is it possible to MIDI freeze modifiers so they are stacked in lanes for comping? Let's give it a shot. You may be able to do it through track versions. All right, so let's say I have an instrument track here. Alright, I'll just turn off the ARP. Alright, so let's say I have alright, make sure I get my octaves right here. Alright, so let's say I have just a quick chord. Alright, so okay, so let's say we listen to this, and of course I chose a monophonic part. Alright, so let's say I have this. I'm going to do, let's go to the inspector, and let's say I want to do like a MIDI insert, so let's go to like an arpeggiator, so let's say we come here. Okay, so I want to take this as I want to duplicate the version and then do the freeze MIDI modifiers. So we'll come here. So now I have the original. I have my freeze MIDI modifiers here, and we could label them. Now I want to do something else. So let's say I want to go to Step Designer. So now as we play, okay, so let's do freeze MIDI modifiers on this, and we could probably even make this a macro of duplicate version freeze MIDI modifiers. So if you really wanted to, all right, so let's say we go back to our different, all right, so let's say I want to take this, and even though we're in MIDI, I want to at this point take this, and we'll go to project, and we'll go to track versions, or let's just right click here, create Okay, so we could create all right, let's just come over here to track versions. And we'll see create lanes from versions. All right, now we will open up our track version. We see our lanes, and now we could just choose to comp between them. I will turn off my snap. So I want that part from there, this part from there, and so let me know if that's kind of what you want to do, but you could just easily make a macro to duplicate the version and then and then apply if you need it in one step, but you probably will duplicate the version, then play around with it, and then freeze MIDI modifiers, do a new version, and then again from here, let's see if it's in the track versions, create lanes from versions, and then you could conversely go back and create versions from lanes. Just let me know if that makes sense for what you want to accomplish. Best Korean Jesus. It's great to have you on. He's based in San Diego. All right, so we see from Uno Memento. Thanks, Greg. That's it. So I guess it was with hiding the inputs. See, Gerald Ely just says, personally, he's not ready for version 13. I haven't nailed down 12 yet. I haven't nailed down 12 either. So, but I'm sure that all the new stuff will be, just inspiring and will, add a lot of great new functionality. So. So we see from Jazzy Lomel, says, hey Greg, I heard there were some issues with the newest Intel CPU chips reading Cubase. Is that still the case? So what is happening is there's kind of a hybrid architecture now. So you have kind of like, kind of like your primary, like kind of like your big processor chips, and then you have hybrid or efficiency chips. So, most operating systems don't really take advantage. The operating systems are still kind of getting it figured out of how on Windows of how to, utilize, the efficiency chips and the powerful chips together. So, so doing that, you don't really get a lot of advantage. You could basically have, Cubase ignore. I'm not sure if it's Cubase that ignores it or your computer will ignore the efficiency cores. And it's kind of how it's kind of working, I believe, for most, within Windows and within most DAW. So it won't kind of it doesn't fully take advantage of the efficiency core, like a hybrid CPU architecture where there's two different speeds for the cores. So, but it will still work. So it's something that the Steinberg team has announced that they're working on. It's just kind of another wrench that kind of gets thrown in, where it's like all of a sudden Intel is like, oh, we're going to do kind of a hybrid CPU architecture, and and that could cause it. Well, it's good maybe for web surfing and Excel. It may not be so applicable to take advantage of for DAW use. So you could still use them. It's just not going to take full bandwidth of the efficiency cores and kind of the performance cores. Okay. Okay, so you see from clarification from Best Green Jesus says, as MIDI faders, buttons, I want to assign it to different MIDI channels, but it adds a separate button fader for the same button because it's a different MIDI channel. Okay, so let me just come over here to MIDI remote here. I'll just check to make sure. While we're let's say if I want to add a new. So let's see. And if you want to send me an email, but it looks like, so let me know if you go into like the fader properties on the right hand side, if setting the channel there is helpful. But if you want to send me kind of a more detailed, I know you're like really good at sending little videos. If you want to send a video over, I'd be happy to kind of pass it along to the team. So thanks for bringing it up. See, Sauber is just saying, "Oh, such an easy and obvious way to do this." Thanks. So it's always good when you could use your existing equipment and get more functionality out of it and save a buttload of money too. So. All right, so we see Sabra just saying, thanks everyone in the chat. Greg, this is an epic resource I've used countless times. Much appreciated. You're welcome. And it's only as good as all the people are asking wonderful questions as well. So, all right, so thanks. I see from Best Green Jesus says he's going to send it over this weekend, so that'd be great. Thank you for, I'll mention it to the team. All right. All right, so we see Gareth is saying that Sauber had the ROTD, which I guess is a revelation of the day. All right, so I think we're at the end of questions. We'll see if there's any more that kind of sneak in. Thank you for all the great questions. I think it's just always so wonderful that, I get to learn new things about Cubase as well. On all these live streams, and I'm really so grateful that all of you spent time kind of learning Cubase along with me, and I hope that I've shared some insights. But it's really just so wonderful to see such a wonderful community. I appreciate everyone being involved with live streams, and always appreciate Jazz Dude. It feels like he's my co-pilot, my right-hand man. I'm so appreciative of everything he does and what Agent K does for moderation, and just everyone for making it such a wonderful community. So, okay, so I see a comment from Bruce M coming. Maybe just saw something about changing presets with Groove Agent, and it just retracted his message. We'll see if it comes back. So we see from Jazzy Lamel says, so as far as the Intel chip, can I still upgrade to an i9 system, or should I wait? So I'm personally running an i9 system, and it's fast. I think I have like a 10900, and it's really like a fast machine, so it's been running great. So I think you're safe to run an i9 system. If you have the choice of going between a hybrid system and not, just go for the full performance cores as well. So we see from Bruce M, is there a way to prevent Groove Agent SE5 from losing the multi-out configuration when changing kits? I think it's going to be stored with the kits, but let me see if I could find something. I'll take another look at it. I think we've looked at it before, but like a lock function kind of on the mixer. And I'm not sure if you're in a Beat Agent or an acoustic agent. Alright, so we'll just... Alright, so just... Alright, so let's come over here. So let's say we have... We'll go to the instrument pad here. So let's say we have our kick. Right, so right now we open this up, we play the pattern here. Just okay, so say we have alright, so I can go to my mixer. Alright, so we have our kick going here. So let me just see if there's any. I'll just solo that. Sorry. To see if there's some kind of lock function of some kind. Alright, so I'll just test it here. So we'll play this, and I'll load another kit, and we'll probably lose the separate routing. Let me just check in options. I don't think there's anything in here, but I don't know anything off the top of my head that allows us to kind of lock the output routing. But I'll pass that along to the team and see if there's anything that might happen in the future. So I think it's going to be the same with acoustic agent as well. All right, so we see Brian Sawyer is running 16-core i9 on his PC. Yeah, I think mine's 10-core. Let's see. Michael Teams is saying, thanks for a great learning resource, Greg. You rock. So I try to be as good as you, Michael Teams, with your ice cream. It inspires me to do better. All right, let's see if there's any others that come in. I'll play around more of Groove Agent, but I don't think there's a way to lock. All right, we'll see if there's any more that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up just a couple minutes early. So once again, thank you for all the incredible questions. It was really fun and interesting live stream today. And once again, we'll be doing our Zoom meetup next Friday, starting around 3 p.m. So we'll have kind of a shorter 2-hour live stream, and then followed by the Zoom meetup. So we hope to see some new faces and meet some new people that are attendees. But again, we'll be doing it Tuesday, our full usual 4-hour live stream, or whenever we run out of questions. And we hope that everyone has a wonderful weekend and that everyone stays safe and healthy. And we will see everyone back on Tuesday and look forward to seeing everyone on the Zoom meetup next Friday. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend and goodbye.